morning. Welcome to Pope's Plates. If you're new to our channel, we're delighted to have you. If you're a frequent watcher, you're part of our family, so welcome. I'm making this morning
Pardon Charlie while he licks the door frame, I guess.
a recipe that's Cuban. It's black beans, and it's served actually, what makes it Cuban, is it's served over saffron rice with red onion and red wine vinegar on it. It was made famous by a young man that lived upstairs from me when I was in graduate school. And this is not a recipe that everybody loves, but we're crazy about it in our family. I'm cutting an onion. That's part of the base for this. The onion will saute along with some green pepper, garlic, and a pretty fair amount of olive oil. You use a half a cup of olive oil to get this started, and that soaks into the beans and that gives them flavor. I'm going to finish cutting this onion and get our green pepper ready. All right, that's good for the onion. I'm going to take this green pepper, I'm going to get the sides off. We'll get rid of the seeds, the membranes. We don't need that. Put that garbage bowl. And this will also be not a tiny chop, but fairly small, because these beans will cook for a long time. I actually cook them for about maybe 2 hours. The beans themselves were soaked overnight and have been drained so that they had a chance to plump up a little bit. Obviously, dry beans, you can cook them dry, but if they soak overnight, they cook much more easily and for a shorter period of time. This will cook up so that they don't have to be just tiny bites of pepper. Okay. Now the other thing I've got is garlic here. I'm going to take off just the little bitty ends of garlic and chop them a little bit, not much, because these two will cook. Now remember, we're going to add these after we have put the onion and the green pepper in to cook, so we don't want our garlic to burn, but I will chop this just a little bit so that we don't have giant chunks. Now, garlic overboard off the plate here. Okay, that looks like that ought to work. The other thing that I'm going to chop here while I'm at the counter is some ham. You add cubed ham. And so I've got a slice of ham. This happens to be honey ham. And I'm going to just cube this. I'm going to have to get some scissors to get this open, I think. My cutting board is getting pretty full here. I'm going to need to separate all of this out a little bit in order to get all of this ham cut. My cutting board is getting really full, so I'm going to cut the rest of this ham off camera, and we'll take our next step. We're ready now to get the beans going. I'm going to take the stopper out of this olive oil because a half a cup of olive oil takes a long time to pour through one of these little stoppers. All right. Now turn the heat on. I'm going to leave this pretty high until the heat comes up, and then we'll add the onion and the green pepper and cook them for a brief period of time until they're not quite translucent but a little tender. And Charlie seems to be willing to help with all of this morning. The oil is hot enough now to add the onion. Ooh, you can hear it sizzle. Good. And the green pepper. Trying not to get this into the stove itself. Now I'm leaving the garlic here on the board until we've had a chance to cook this for just a little bit. The onion and the green pepper have cooked a bit, and I'm going to add the garlic in now so that it's not going to burn. We're going to cook this until it's just a little fragrant. The guy that made this recipe first, his name was Bill. He and his roommate lived upstairs from my two roommates and me when we were in graduate school. He was actually a mountain goat, but he, in the disguise of a human being, I think, because he's the one that had us hiking the Appalachian Trail every weekend. He was quite a good cook. One of these days I'll have to share the story of our homemade beer with you, but this is not the time to do that. All right, we're going to add now the ham that we cut up. And I also am adding 1 slice of bacon that has been cut. That bacon gives it just a little bit of an interesting flavor, more smoky than the ham would add. So we've added the bacon in. We rinsed the beans well. We soaked them overnight. We rinsed all of that water off, and we've had them in the drainer now. We're going to add the black beans. Stir this around just a little bit. We're going to add 32 ounces of chicken broth. Now, you can also add water. You don't have to use the chicken broth. That's either way is fine. I have made it both ways. I had plenty of chicken broth, so I decided I would add that this morning. You're also going to add a bay leaf to this. And these are small, so I think I'm going to go ahead and add a couple. They're pieces of them. And you're going to add about a half teaspoon of salt. And I will taste this again as it's finished cooking. Now remember, this is going to cook a long time. These beans are going to take a while to cook. And get really tender. So I'm going to let this come to a boil. We'll turn the heat down to a simmer, and it'll cook for at least 2 hours, maybe longer. Well, welcome back. Our beans have cooked a little over 2 hours, maybe 2 hours and 20 minutes. We have prepared the saffron rice, which is a packaged mix. It's not a sponsored, but we use the packaged mix because it's got a great flavor. What we're going to do is to strain some of the black beans. There's liquid here. One way to avoid that liquid is to mash some of the beans. It makes the sauce thicker, but I haven't done that. We like ours a little soupy. So I'm going to put the beans over the rice. Remember, I said we were going to use red onions, so I've got some chopped red onions that'll go over the top. To finish the dish, we put just a little dribble of olive oil over the top and some red wine vinegar. We like ours pretty vinegary, but you can use as much or as little as you like. This is a perfect dinner. With a side salad, even better. If you like this recipe, please let us know in the comments below. We invite you to subscribe to our channel. And until we see you again, let's keep cooking.
Hi, Welcome back to Pope's Plates. We're so glad you're here, and thank you if you're a returning viewer. We'd love to have you back. Today we're going to be making macaroni and cheese. This is a recipe that we found from my grandmother. The interesting thing is that I, without knowing this recipe existed, sort of developed my own macaroni and cheese recipe, and it was almost exactly the same. The one thing I do that she didn't do is add paprika. So we're not going to add paprika today. We're going to start our water so that it is at a boil. And make sure that came on. It did. I'm going to add a pinch of salt so that it'll be ready for the macaroni. And I'm also going to preheat the oven to 350. All right. Perfect. While we're waiting for our water to come to a boil, we are going to grate 2 cups of cheese. I prefer my cheese pretty sharp, and so I have 1 block of extra sharp and 1 block of sharp. So I'm going to take the extra sharp first, and I'm going to go ahead and use the bowl that I'm going to mix it in. And we're just going to grate this. I love macaroni and cheese. It is, I even like Kraft macaroni and cheese. I should have said even, because it's actually pretty good. But I love homemade macaroni and cheese. The one thing I have noticed is that it makes a lot of macaroni and cheese. And so you can definitely have this recipe if you're just going to be making it for yourself. Okay, so we probably have half a cup of extra sharp, I'm sorry. And because not everybody likes sharp cheese as much as I do, the rest of it we're going to do is regular sharp cheese. It is, I want to say it's important. It's definitely not imperative that you grate your own cheese, but pre-grated cheese has a coating on it, and I honestly can't remember what it's called, but I'll look it up and put it in the card up here. And it makes it harder to melt, because if you have it, in your car when you're leaving the grocery store, you don't want melted cheese. So I'm going to continue to grate this. Next time I might use a food processor, except I don't know where my grating thing is on my food processor. I'm going to continue to grate this, and we'll get back with you when we're ready to put our macaroni in the pot. Our macaroni water has come to a boil, and so I'm going to add half of a 16-ounce box because it calls for 1 cup. I just kind of eyeballed that. So we have our cheese, and I'm going to put that aside over here. In a smaller bowl, we're going to whisk 1 medium-sized egg. We're going to go ahead and beat that a little bit, just like that. We're also going to add half a cup of milk or heavy cream. I'm just eyeballing this because I know how many ounces are in here. It's kind of easy to know how much a half a cup is. So we're going to keep beating that. We want it to be a little bit fluffy. And we're going to put 1/4 of a teaspoon of pepper into our egg mixture. Let's see, our salt is over here. 1/4 of a teaspoon of salt. And I'm cheating to look at the recipe a little bit. 1/4 of a teaspoon of dry mustard. It's interesting how dry mustard works into this recipe. We're going to keep beating this and then make sure everything is mixed in. And then we're going to set it aside. Our macaroni is almost ready. One thing that we're going to do, we're going to make 2 different versions of this. I'm cutting the sort of dry ends off of the ham. We're going to make two versions of this. One is going to be a sneaky version to get vegetables into your children's diet, and the other one is going to be an adult version. Both of the versions are going to have chopped ham. I just got a ham steak from the grocery store, and I'm going to chop that up right here. I'm going to save this because my dog will love it. I hear our pasta water, and I think our macaroni is almost finished. So I'm going to grease these with some butter. Our butter is kind of soft, these casserole dishes. Our butter is kind of soft, and so because I don't want butter all over my hands, I'm just going to use a clean paper towel, rub the butter on the sides and on the bottom. Oh, I think I got too much butter. That's okay. There can never be too much butter. And because we're going to mix most of this in the dishes, I'm going to put a little bit of ham in one and the remaining ham in the other. That one didn't get cut apart very well. Our pasta has completely cooked, and so it is al dente because it is going to be in the oven. So I'm going to take one strainerful, and put it in the sneaky little kid version. And the rest is going to go into the adult version. I'm going to get this filled up, and then we'll come back, and I'm going to show you a trick that my mom learned that we're going to test out. It's going to be interesting. I'm going to give you a little explanation of what we're doing because it's going to look super crazy. But my mom saw this trick on Instagram or Facebook or something, where if you want to cook the florets or the tree part of the broccoli, you wrap the stem in tin foil and you dip the florets into boiling water. Now, we're going to do this in two kind of shifts. The one macaroni and cheese that's for adults is going to have some bigger cooked florets, and then I'm going to put it back in because we want the one for the kids to have the little bitty pieces that they can't see. So we're going to dip this in, and if you, what did I do with that? If you're worried about burning your fingers, you can hold it like this and you're back. Oh, that's such a pretty color green already. Isn't it amazing that broccoli does that? Okay. So we're going to cut more than half of these off. Oh, good. That's not hot. And this tiny little bit of the tree right here, we're going to put it in here. We're going to cook it for longer because it needs to be a little mushier and come apart more easily to fool the children. Some of your kids might like broccoli. I know I didn't when I was little. I don't love it now, but I like it and I'll eat it. Perfect. Okay. We're going to set these aside. Actually, I'm going to put them all right here in our chopping block. Okay. The instructions from my grandmother say to assemble it in the casserole dish. So I'm going to cut we're going to call it adult broccoli, into florets here, bite size. I'm going to cut the florets off. They're actually kind of already pretty much bite size. And they're par cooked. Say par boiled, but we're not boiling these. You may see that I actually have some really small pieces that just came off as I was cutting the broccoli. And then these little edge pieces, the little leaves on the trees. We're going to cut them And then I'm going to really, that one's too big, squish them. And cut them small. Put that in there. Perfect. All right. So I'm going to put the remaining broccoli over to the side. Half is going to be mixed in and half is going to be put on the top. So I'm just going to put a small handful of cheese. And now, the way I make it, I mix it together in a big mixing bowl first before I put the cheese in it. But following my grandmother's instructions, we're going to mix this up. It's ironic because I'm the messy one in my family by far. And my grandmother cooked really messy, which does not surprise me because this is making a gigantic mess. But it looks great. So now I'm going to take the little one and I'm going to put, I would say, a fourth of the mixture in the little one and the rest in the big one. Scrape it out. Excellent. I'm just going to mix this up a little bit. I find it interesting that we don't make a roux for this. But I sometimes make a roux and sometimes I don't. It kind of depends on what I want the end result to be. Make sure that sort of the creamy part gets everywhere. Now we're going to take the remainder of our cheese and scatter it on the top. I'm going to do this on the top. And to add a bit of the crispy element, we're going to put some panko breadcrumbs. It says, I'm not sure how much it says, but we're just going to eyeball it. And then I'm going to do one thing that my grandmother did not do. And hope she doesn't haunt me. So we're going to put some panko on this. And I am going to put some pats of butter on the top because in my experience, panko doesn't brown really well unless it has butter on it. So I'm just going to cut a piece off and then kind of almost tear it. And remember, we preheated our oven to 350 at the beginning of the video. And so it is ready. So let me wipe my hands off and then we'll put it in the oven. And I'll get back to you when we take them out. So my grandmother said that she did not give a time on her recipe. She had to cook it until it was firm but not dry. So the little one probably cooked for about 15 minutes and the big one I think is ready. Oh yes. Woo. Steamy. Close this. It probably cooks for 22 or 23 minutes. This looks really good. The grown-up version definitely has visible broccoli, but it looks fantastic. Are there any recipes that you have from your grandparents? I'd love to hear about it in the comment section below. The recipe is in the description box below, but we've added some ham and some broccoli and some butter on the top. Let us know if you make this and what you think of it. And until we see you again, let's keep cooking.
Welcome to Pope's Plates. We have an interesting recipe that we're preparing today, turkey lasagna. It's made with sweet Italian sausage made from turkey. We're going to do a few things here at the counter, and then we're going to move to the stove to do the rest of it, and then finally back to the counter again to put things together. This recipe has been sort of all over the internet before. I've made it repeatedly for my family. It's a really interesting recipe. In fact, I was asked to make it multiple times for our library luncheon. We do a luncheon for the staff at the library every year, and my lasagna recipe was a favorite, so I made that frequently along with salad and a salad dressing that has been recorded here on our channel, French dressing, which is also outstanding. I encourage you to look back for that video. That makes a really great addition to the meal. So we're slicing it calls for a large onion. I didn't have a large onion. I had a couple of smaller ones, and this one's got a little bit of a funky place in the middle, so I'm going to get rid of that. And these are sliced, chopped, fairly small. They will cook in some olive oil before we add the garlic to them. That looks like enough. I think I'm just not going to bother with the rest of this little piece over here. I don't think we need that one. That looks like enough onion. All right, let me get the garbage out of the way here. I'm also going to chop the garlic. I've got 3 cloves of garlic. We want to chop them fairly fine, but they're too going to cook for a good long while in the sauce. The sauce has tomatoes, tomato paste. The tomatoes are crushed. They will cook along with the onion and the garlic and the sausage, and actually the grease from the sausage. There's not a lot of grease in this sausage, but we're going to keep that there because that adds a little bit of flavor. And we've addressed before that my knife skills are not the best, so I'm getting these as small as I can. All right, the final thing we're going to do here at the counter is get the casing off of the sausage links. This is sweet Italian sausage. It's not terribly spicy, and I really prefer it to using ground beef with lasagna. It has a different flavor profile to it, but it's really good. I just make a slit down the center of that sausage. Well, I say I do. Try to. And peel the skin off of the sausage so that you've got little flippy pieces of skin there. I'm adding some olive oil to the skillet. I've got a pretty good sized skillet here because it's going to have to hold a lot. Turn the heat on and leave it on medium high until the oil is completely hot. And then we'll add the onions first. Remember, you don't want to add the garlic at the same time because the garlic can burn and it gets really bitter if it's burned too much. I think the onion can go in now. I'm making a little bit of a sizzly noise. So I've added all of that onion and stir it around so that it begins to cook, and we'll wait for this to be almost translucent before we add the garlic. The onion is translucent. I'm going to add the garlic. We'll cook the garlic for about a minute with the onion before we add the sausage to it, just until you begin to smell the garlic. It becomes a little bit fragrant as the heat hits it. Ooh, I can smell it. That smells good. I'm going to turn this heat down. We're going to add the sausage in. And I'm actually going to use another tool here. I've got something that's akin to a spatula that is easier to break up the sausage. And we don't want big chunks of sausage in our sauce. We want this to be pretty well broken apart. And it's going to take about 8 to 10 minutes for the sausage to brown completely. You do want it cooked through. You don't want to have partially raw sausage. Even though this is going to cook more in the oven, you still want the sausage cooked well. So I'm going to work on this, and when it's ready to start the next step, I'll be back with you. As you can see, there's not a great deal of grease in this, so I am not going to try to drain anything off. The next thing we're going to do is to add a 28-ounce can of crushed tomatoes. And I'm going to actually save this can, set it aside, because we are trying something a little unusual. This time we have got oven-ready lasagna noodles. And the box of the oven-ready lasagna noodles said that for every layer of noodles, you're going to add 1/4 cup of water or milk to your sauce. So I'm going to keep that can to add a little bit of water to it. The next thing, I need a spoon here, is tomato paste. I'm going to add this in. Get as much of it out as I can. And some people suggest that when you're using tomato paste, that you add a little bit of sugar to the recipe to cut a little bit of the acidity of the tomatoes. This recipe does not call for any sugar added. I have not added sugar in the past, and I found it to be perfectly good without the sugar in it. All right, we're going to add now half of the parsley that we have prepared for this sauce. We're going to add all of the basil that we have. We're going to add half of the black pepper and half of the salt. The rest of the salt will go actually into the cheese filling that goes over the lasagna noodles. So we're going to let this simmer for maybe 10 minutes or so, just to blend the flavors. And I'm going to go and make the cheese sauce that will go over the noodles. The cheese sauce takes an entire container of ricotta cheese, I actually got part skim ricotta. You can certainly use whole milk ricotta. Makes it a little bit richer, adds a little bit more calorie to it. So I've got the part skim. You're also going to add a cup of Parmesan cheese. You're going to add the balance of the salt that we did not put in the sauce, the balance of the pepper that we did not put in the sauce. I'm going to go ahead at this point and add the egg and mix this together before I add the goat cheese and the parsley. I'll mix this just a little bit. And then I'm going to use the hand mixer to mix this well. That looks like it's mixed nicely enough. Add the balance of the parsley. And I'm going to get my hands messy again here with 4 ounces of goat cheese, just sort of broken up into the sauce, and then I'll stir it just a little bit. The goat cheese has a really nice tart flavor to it and really adds a lot to the dish when it's finished. To assemble the casserole, you put a little bit of sauce in the bottom of the pan. That's going to keep the noodles from sticking to it. Kind of smooth this out to cover as much of the bottom as you can. All right, these are the oven-ready lasagna noodles. Oh, interesting, they fit exactly in the pan. We're going to take part of the cheese mixture, and we're going to spread this to the extent that we can spread it over these noodles. All right, the next layer is some sliced mozzarella. Now you can get your own log of mozzarella and slice it yourself, but boy, these already done slices are really handy. Then we're going to add another layer of sauce. Another layer of noodles. Some more mozzarella. We didn't know whether or not we'd need to open a second container of mozzarella, but I think we're going to need to make sure we've got enough. So I'm going to do that and get that ready to go on our plate. All right, now half of the remaining sauce, because you want to end up with a layer of sauce on the top. So you may have to spread this out a little bit extra in order to cover. I'm going to put 3 more of our lasagna noodles in here. The rest of the cheese. This makes a good size dinner amount. We've got 5 people for dinner tomorrow night. One of whom is my son, who will probably eat half of this all by himself. But it makes for a very nice company casserole, and probably have some leftovers. Alrighty, that's good. Make sure I get all of that cheese mixture out of here. And let's put our last bits of mozzarella. You know anything about mozzarella, when it melts, remember your pizza where you've got long stringy pieces of cheese hanging off? That's what this does. It really looks good when it's finished. Very fancy looking dish. All right, we're gonna put the last 3 slices on there. Okay, then we finish up with the balance of the sauce. I'll spread this out Okay, I've got the final amount of sauce on the top. You use a cup of Parmesan in the cheese mixture, but I'm going to sprinkle Parmesan over the top of this. It will brown nicely when you cook it. I'd say probably I'm adding maybe another half cup to the top. When you bake this, you want to bake it with the cover on for about an hour, and then you're going to take the cover off so that the cheese on the top can really get brown and kind of crunchy. But the noodles will cook in the sauce. We added a little bit of extra liquid. Remember, I saved that in the tomato can and added a little bit of extra liquid to it. So we are preparing this. We're not going to cook it here at my home today. We're actually going to take it over to Jennifer's and she will heat it up and fix it for dinner tomorrow night. If you like this recipe, please let us know. It's a favorite in our family. And until we see you next time, let's keep cooking.
Before we begin, preheat an oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to begin by chopping the equivalent of one onion. I had a half of one and a half of the other. But you're going to chop those pretty finely, but they don't need to be very uniform. And you're going to saute them until they are tender. They do not have to be cooked all the way through because they'll be cooked in the oven as well. Set the onions aside to cool a little bit because since there will be egg in our meatloaf, we don't want the onions to be too hot because we don't want scrambled eggs in our meatloaf. Then we're going to use 1 to 1 1/4 pound of ground beef. I use 80-20, but use whatever fat content you like. Let's now add 1 egg and 4 tablespoons of onion soup mix. You can use the packaged kind, or I have a recipe that I'll link in the description box below for homemade onion soup mix. Now that our onions have cooled, we're going to add them into the ground beef mixture. I also sometimes will put green peppers in my meatloaf. I think it just depends on what I have at the time and what I'm really wanting to eat that day. Now for the binder. In addition to the egg, we're going to add 1/2 cup of seasoned breadcrumbs. I like to use panko breadcrumbs. My grandmother's recipe calls for saltine crackers, which I think is kind of fun. I don't do that, but you definitely could if you wanted to. Let's begin to mix our meatloaf together. This is not our final mix, but I just want to bring in some of the breadcrumbs to the meat and set it aside while we make the sweet and sour sauce that not only tops the meatloaf, but it goes in the meatloaf. Let's make our sweet and sour sauce. Actually, my grandmother's sweet and sour sauce. We're going to add 1 8-ounce can of tomato juice, and to that we're going to add 1/3 cup of brown sugar and 1/3 cup of white vinegar. The last ingredient in our sweet and sour sauce is 1 teaspoon of prepared yellow mustard. Once all of the ingredients of the sweet and sour sauce are put in the bowl, you're going to whisk it together really well. You may need to set it aside for a few minutes and let the brown sugar dissolve, but mixing it really well and quickly will probably get that done for you and you won't have to set it aside. I didn't show this. I'm not sure where this footage went, but I add 1/4 of the sweet and sour sauce, which is 1/4 cup, to the ground beef and mix it well, form it, and put it in a glass casserole dish. Let's go ahead and add an additional 1/4 cup sweet and sour sauce to the top of our meatloaf and put it in a 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for 1 hour, or until the meatloaf reaches an internal temperature of 150 degrees Fahrenheit. I like to serve it with mashed potatoes and some green vegetable. I really hope you make this meatloaf and enjoy it. My grandmother loved this meatloaf, and so do I.
Hi, welcome back to Pope's Plates. Today we're going to be making individual shepherd pies. I'm not sure which one is the plural. I'm a little bit neurodiverse, and so I have some sensory sensitivities, and one of them is peeling potatoes. I do not like the way they feel, kind of like peaches. My mom is peeling the potatoes for me. We're starting the potatoes, we're going to put them in some salted water because the top of shepherd's pie is traditionally mashed potatoes. And even though ours are going to be individual shepherd's pie, we're going to top them with potatoes, and we put them in the oven so that the potatoes brown. We're making this because we made some pasties. I think you'll see that video before this one, I'm pretty sure, in the lineup. And we had a few things left over, and rather than, I don't know, let it go bad or forget about it, we decided we would freeze the things we had left over and in a few days make more.
Alexa, stop.
You can also use instant potatoes, but I happen to have some potatoes. Fun fact about instant potatoes. I did not know this, and I saw it on the internet, said there's a possibility it's not true, but I think it is, that when you are watching a TV show and you see that it's snowing, they're actually dropping instant potatoes because they're thick so that you can see them on camera, and they're light so that they blow in the wind. Fun fact you didn't even know you came here for, and you're leaving with totally useless information. All right, we're going to put some salt in our water. I'm gonna maybe turn this on. My mom's stove and I are not great friends, although she's not great friends with it either. As soon as this comes to a boil, we're gonna put the potatoes in and we'll come back to you. Our shepherd's pie calls for a medium yellow onion. Actually, if I were making it for just myself, I would use a red onion. Those are my preference. But one, I didn't have one. And two, it calls for a yellow onion. Now I'm going to cut these rather thinly, small, because they do cook in the hamburger fat for a little bit, but I would not mind it. I've been told, and my mom can confirm or deny this, but I've been told that when I was little, I used to eat onions like apples. So I would not care to bite into a large chunk of onion, but other people might not have the same love that I do. When I was little, I also wanted to marry cottage cheese. Like, legitimately marry cottage cheese. I was an odd child. You know what? I'm going to cut a little bit more onion, but I'm not going to cut the entire rest of this because that's an awful lot of onion for 1 pound of ground beef. Now, the next thing, we had some grated carrots, and I did not tell the person I live with, and they got thrown away. Totally my fault. And so rather than using grated carrots, let me check on my potatoes. Great, they're looking good. Rather than using grated potatoes, we're going to use these small baby small baby carrots. I'm really going to cut them not as small as I can, but really small. I mean, you can barely see that in between my fingers because carrots are very dense and tend to take a long time to cook. I also am not going to put as many carrots as I normally would. When we made our pasties, Mom and I both thought, didn't you think that they were a little too sweet? That we put in a little bit too many carrots. There's nothing wrong with them. They actually tasted really good. I can't wait for y'all to watch that video. I had to break in twice when we were editing to explain the disaster that we created. Well, that the dough created. But it's a funny one. If we were ever to make a blooper episode, there would be lots of takes from that one. All right. So we have these cut. There's one I need to get a little bit better. Our potatoes are finished. Because these are going to go on top of our shepherd's pie, I don't want them super thin and runny. So I'm going to put 2 tablespoons pats of butter. I'm going to use our electric mixer and just start it on low. All right, I'm going to get what's on the side. And get that going again. Okay, now, as you can see, they are not yet creamy. Excuse me, Charlie. Thank you. And so rather than add milk or heavy cream, I am going to start with maybe a 1/4 cup of sour cream. Now, what I will say is that it is okay, people never want their mashed potatoes to be lumpy. It is okay if these are a little lumpy because you want to see the texture of the potatoes. I was not planning on putting any milk or heavy cream in here, but I'm going to make a little bit of a judgment call and put just a little bit in. All right, so I'm just going to put a dash, not even a 1/4 of a cup. I'm going to put some pepper, some salt, okay. It's time to make the filling for the shepherd's pie. I'm going to attempt to turn this on. It only took 3 tries. Yay. And then I'm going to take my mom's meat stabber. I don't know what it's called. Now this is we made the pasties and we had ground beef left. So we had about a pound of 80/20 ground beef left. Ooh, let me get that over there. Let me make sure I have it all out. Now this will probably take, we're only going to get it halfway before I get back to you. And I would say it would take me about 4 minutes, and then I will come back to you and we will put the rest of it together. I would say our ground beef is about maybe a third brown. So I'm going to add our vegetables in. And this, we will still be able to drain out some of the fat if we find we need to. Our onions and carrots and ground beef have browned sufficiently. So while this is still on, and I'm going to put it on about medium, I'm going to add half a teaspoon of garlic. And again, fresh garlic is always better, but we have this, and you know, groceries are expensive. So all right, we don't need to cook this long. Oh, I can smell it. That smells good. And then I'm going to put my flat leaf parsley in. Now, I am going to use a little bit of dried thyme because when I ordered the groceries, they didn't have any fresh thyme, or I lost it, which is honestly probably the more likely thing. So I'm going to put in half, maybe a fourth of a teaspoon. Thyme is pretty strong. I may put a little bit more in than that. All right, so then I'm going to stir this up, and I'm going to put in, I would say half, a little bit more than half a teaspoon of Worcestershire. I cannot say it, guys. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I have made a cornstarch slurry with beef broth. So I put about a tablespoon of beef broth, a tablespoon of cornstarch into probably maybe a half a cup, half a cup of of beef broth. I'm going to mix it a little bit, and I'm going to pour about half of it in here because you want there to be some thickness. Yeah. Okay, so I'm actually going to pour the rest in. So I'm going to have my mom come over and take a look at this. I think we might need a little bit more beef broth slurry.
Yes.
Okay, so she's going to make that. And we're going to get this thickened up and made. We're going to assemble our shepherd's pie, and then we'll get back to you when we start to do that. Our beef mixture is ready. We ended up, I would say, adding another teaspoon of beef broth and maybe another teaspoon of cornstarch, maybe 2 teaspoons of beef broth. I'm going to add probably half a cup of frozen peas. If you add peas out of a can, I'm sure it will taste lovely. It will get really squished. So I'm just going to mix those in. It sounds like I've got BBs in here. Okay, we have these adorable, is that hot enough? Little individual cast iron skillets we got at a store called Pop Shelf, which is one of my favorite places. I'm having a hard time getting this up. So we're going to put these in here. I'm going to use the edge of the pan. We have a very unhappy dog outside. As soon as we started making meat, he was chewing on the side of my pants, which I'm not really sure why. Okay, we may not have enough to fill up the big one, which is fine. Because again, we were just using things that we had left over. So it isn't, I would measure more carefully if you're having a dinner party. But we've got the 3 of them filled up well. So I'm going to set this to the side. Grab the green pea that went overboard. Put this one away because we're not going to use it. And then we're going to top it with our potatoes. Now, like when you have mashed potatoes, normally when you would top a pie of some kind, you wouldn't want it lumpy and high. But just like when you make mashed potatoes at home, you're going to have a good percentage of your meat and potatoes. So don't skimp on the potatoes. like over this part. I'm surprised it didn't make more. Aren't you? I like them more rustic, but if you think our shepherd's pie have come out of the oven. They look fantastic. There is definitely some crunch on the top. When we took them out, we could hear them sizzling. You may remember that I cut some parsley earlier. And so we're going to put some of this on the top just to add a little color and a little bit of flavor. Oh, it smells so good. I can definitely smell the garlic. This is a really great recipe if you're having a dinner party because you have individual shepherd's pies. You could serve it with green bean casserole or a spinach salad, really anything that you want. I hope that you make this, and if you do, I hope that you love it. Like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps the algorithm. Until we see you next time, let's keep cooking.
Hi, this is Jennifer. Thank you for joining me as we take a walk through the recipes that have built the culinary foundation of my family.
Okay, today we have a southern favorite, shrimp and grits. Now, if you don't think you like grits, you ought to try this one. Grits is just really mushed up cornbread. You just have to think of it that way. If you like cornbread, you're going to like grits. I have started a pot of water, and I'm going to add 1 cup of steel-cut oats, grits, rather, to the pot. I'm starting with 4 cups of water to make the grits, with a teaspoon of salt, a half teaspoon of pepper, and we're going to bring this to a boil before we add the grits. Okay, when you add this, you're going to have to add it slowly and stir at the same time. If you don't do that, the grits are going to get all blocked up together. But you don't want that. You want to have smooth grits. I'm adding a little bit of butter, about 3 or 4 tablespoons of butter. Makes it nice and rich. And when it is closer to done, I'm going to be adding a package of sharp cheddar cheese and just setting it off the heat while I prepare the shrimp. I have to chop up a couple of things here. We're going to add bacon, which we have cooked already, so that it's ready to crumble in. We're going to slice a couple of scallions that will go into the shrimp when it's cooked. This has to be ready. You know, shrimp is persnickety. You cook it, and when it's ready, it is ready. You don't want to let it cook too long because it starts to get like leather. So we want to have everything ready to put in the pot as soon as the shrimp is done. We've got bacon, and I am putting the rest of the chipped up bacon in the bowl over here. I've got some jarred garlic. Now, I kind of like fresh garlic, to tell you the truth, but the jarred garlic is what I have. We're going to take the equivalent of about a teaspoon, and I'm just going to whack it in here with the scallions. And when it's time, we'll add this to the shrimp. I have preheated the skillet with the bacon grease that was left over. And I'm going to add the shrimp to the pot. Now please keep in mind, you do not want this to overcook. You keep an eye on it. You turn the shrimp when they begin to get slightly pink and opaque. This takes maybe 3 to 5 minutes, 3 minutes aside. And I'm not the best turner over with a spoon. I think I'm going to try a fork here. Okay, the shrimp are just about ready for us to add the scallions, the bacon, the garlic, and the lemon juice. A couple of more that need to get a little bit more color on them. They're going to cook for a few more minutes with the scallions and the bacon. Okay, scallions and garlic in. Pardon? There we go. All right, let's add
I've got it.
the bacon. Ooh, this is going to be so good. So good. And we're going to add just a little bit of lemon juice. That perks up the flavor of the shrimp. And a couple of tablespoons. I'm going to eyeball that. I can smell the garlic and the bacon. This is so pretty. It's going to be so good. Okay. This recipe was unknown to some of my friends who were born and raised in Pennsylvania. Maybe this is too much of a Southern dish, but they have come to absolutely love it. And one of the sisters is our shrimp cooker every time we fix shrimp and grits on one of our trips. We'll put all this together and be back for our photograph of the finished product.
Walk through the recipes that have built the culinary foundation of my family. Today we're going to be making a fantastic lemon dill baked salmon. Begin by preheating your oven to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. Let's begin by finely mincing 3 cloves of garlic. I know there are 4 cloves on the screen, but that is way too much garlic. I realized after I ate some of it, or I didn't mince it finely enough, but 3 cloves will be plenty. In fact, it might be easier to use a garlic press if you happen to have one. I didn't have one available at this moment. Now, let's take 2 small to medium size lemons. You're going to cut the ends off of both of them. Set those aside because we're going to juice them a little bit later. It doesn't give a whole lot of juice, but you really are not going to need a whole lot of juice. And then you're going to very thinly, or I guess thinly, slice both lemons. If you would like for there to be a little more color in your final salmon, you can also use limes, but no, it's going to change the flavor just a little bit. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. Then you're going to take 2 pounds of skinless salmon and you're going to put it on a foil-lined baking sheet or sheet pan, and you're going to want to make sure there's extra on the sides because we're going to be making a sort of steaming pouch from the foil. Now we're going to drizzle about 2 teaspoons of olive oil over the top of the salmon and 1 teaspoon of salt. I did not use 1 whole teaspoon because I really don't like salty foods, but most people will enjoy 1 teaspoon. And then 1/2 teaspoon of coarse ground pepper. And then you're going to put the 3 cloves of finely minced garlic over the salmon. This is one of those do as I say, not as I do instances, because this garlic is definitely not finely minced at all. Now we're going to put about 1 teaspoon of lemon juice, and that comes from juicing the ends of the lemons, just right over that. And then you're going to place the lemon slices on top of the flesh of the salmon. If you really enjoy salmon, what are some of the ways you best like it prepared? Of course, garlic, dill, and lemon are a go-to. I also really like honey balsamic glaze over salmon. Really, salmon is so fantastic with whatever you put it with. Now we're going to put some sprigs of fresh dill weed in between the sort of shingles of lemon on top of our salmon. And then you're going to wrap and seal the salmon tightly. That's why I like to use foil instead of parchment paper, because it's just easier to get a good seal. And then you're going to put it in the oven and bake it for 20 minutes. Another potential trick that you might use is to put another layer of foil over the top, especially if you didn't get the size measured completely, because you really don't want the steam escaping. Then you're going to once you're going to take the salmon out of the oven, and you're going to open the foil wrapping, and then you're going to set the oven to broil and put the salmon back in to caramelize the lemon slices. When you serve your salmon, put a few slices of fresh dill on the top just to brighten the dish up. I really hope you enjoyed this family favorite. Salmon is one of my favorite foods in the world. I hope you enjoyed it, and let us know in the comment section below if you tried it. Thanks for visiting Pope's Plates. Make sure you give this video a thumbs up. Click the notification bell so that you'll know when we have new videos available. And make sure you subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Until I see you again, let's get cooking!